Tonight, Ash Barty's bombshell, the world #1 stunning decision to retire at the top of her game to chase her other dreams. Hillsong founder Brian Houston forced out as head of his megachurch. Police pounce under the cover of darkness at West Hoxton and Abbotsbury. The new link between COVID and your chances of developing diabetes. And George Burgess to sit out the Dragons' clash with the Sharks in the wake of sexual touching allegations.
This is 9 News with Peter Overton.
Good evening. Tennis champion Ash Barty today showed she knows how to lob one clear over our heads, a shot no one saw coming. The world #1 announcing her bombshell decision to retire from the game just 2 months after thrilling the nation with her win at the Australian Open. She certainly quit while she was on top.
For Ash, it was difficult to say, and for a nation, difficult to hear.
I'll be retiring from tennis, and it's the first time I've actually said it out loud, and it's hard to say.
Sitting down with her best friend and former doubles partner Casey Dell'Acqua, the Australian world #1, with the words no one saw coming.
There's no right way, there's no wrong way, it's just my way, and this is perfect for me to share it with you, to talk to you about it.
In tears, Ash explained her shock decision.
I'm so happy and I'm so ready, and I just know at the moment in my heart for me as a person, this is right.
Saying it was her win at Wimbledon last year which changed her.
Australia's Ash Barty is Wimbledon champion.
A childhood dream fulfilled.
To be able to win Wimbledon, which was my dream, the one true dream that I wanted in tennis, that really changed my perspective, and I just had that gut feeling after Wimbledon.
We didn't know it at the time, but after realising her dream, she was chasing the fairy tale in front of an Australian crowd.
There was just a little part of me that wasn't quite satisfied, wasn't quite fulfilled. And then came the challenge of the Australian Open. And I think that for me just feels like the most perfect way, my perfect way.
Saying after reaching the highest of highs in the sport, she knows what it takes to stay there.
I know how much work it takes to bring the best out of yourself. And I've said it to my team multiple times, it's just I don't have that in me anymore.
Ash Barty won Junior Wimbledon at age 15. She has 15 singles titles and 3 Grand Slams to her name. In 2021, it was Wimbledon. This year, the Australian Open, and in 2019, the French Open. She's owned the world #1 ranking for 114 straight weeks, the 4th longest streak in history, only behind Steffi Graf, Serena Williams and Martina Navratilova. Now walking away just a month out from her 26th birthday at the pinnacle of a stellar career.
I thought she was still going out there and really going to defend that Wimbledon title because that's the one that she really loved. What better way than to go out on top as the world #1 and the reigning Australian and Wimbledon champion? It's quite amazing that she's been able to do that.
We never wanted Ash to retire. We would love to have seen her play a long time, and I think that's just that's probably why it's a surprise and a shock, because she's doing it at a young age.
Praise came from the Prime Minister.
I do want to say thank you to Ash for inspiring a country, inspiring a nation at a time when this country really needed a good shot in the arm.
And from the tennis world, Andy Murray, happy for Ash Barty, gutted for tennis, what a player. Petra Kvitova, you're showing your true class, leaving tennis in this beautiful way. From Dylan Alcott, Ash Barty, amazing tennis player, but even better person. And Simona Halep, you were different and special, and we shared some amazing moments. And what's next for you? Grand Slam champion in golf. Ash Barty has walked away from tennis once before. The gifted sportswoman took up cricket in 2015, playing in the WBBL before being drawn back to the court. This time, she says, it's for real.
I know I've done this before, but in a very different feeling, and I'm so grateful to everything that tennis has given me. It's given me all of my dreams plus more.
As a nation, we fell in love with Ash, the little girl with the big racket and even bigger dreams. A proud Indigenous woman who idolised Yvonne Goolagong, wearing an outfit inspired by the 1971 winner when she took the Wimbledon trophy for herself. And earlier this year, her face told the story when her hero showed up to surprise our newly crowned Oz Open champion. She was in the spotlight, but never craved it. Most comfortable with her fiancé Gary, her dogs, her mum and dad, her young nieces, Lucy and Olivia, all with a beer in hand in the stands watching her beloved Richmond. She was the Ipswich girl next door who became a champion with poise, grit, kindness and a quiet determination.
Ash Barty, the person, has so many dreams that she wants to chase after that don't necessarily involve travelling the world, being away from my family. I am spent. I just know physically I have nothing more to give.
Ash Barty will have more to say at a press conference scheduled for tomorrow.
This is right for me, but I'm very excited.
Should we hug it out?
We should.
Lizzie Pearl, 9 News.
And James Bracey joins me in the studio. James, you were lucky enough to be involved in one of the most iconic moments of Ash's career when she won the Australian Open title.
Certainly was, Pete. In hindsight, that moment on set now probably tells us more than we actually knew at the time. Was it a farewell party that only Ash was in on? Were Casey Dellacqua and Alicia Molik in on it too? Whatever the reason for those celebratory beers, what unfolded summed up Ash. She's one of us. We all feel like her mate. Ash craves the simpler life, not the spotlight, and we learnt that today. Well, if you didn't like what unfolded on the set that night, I can assure you those three friends were in their element. And Pete, on reflection, knowing what I do now, the only regret I have from that night is not making Ash stick around for a second cold one.
Good on you, James. Thank you, mate. One-time federal MP Craig Thompson says he will fight allegations he defrauded the state government's COVID-19 support scheme. Thompson was hit with the fresh charges just hours after being sentenced for domestic violence.
Craig Thompson walks free from Gosford Police Station.
How am I feeling? Relieved to get out of a police station after 24 hours of being there.
The former federal MP granted bail on fraud charges and contravening an AVO, despite attempts by police prosecutors who described his conduct as premeditated and calculated.
So we don't think that there is anything that has been done that is wrong or inappropriate.
The court heard the 57-year-old received $25,000 in COVID grants at the height of the pandemic for a demolished cafe which had long ceased trading, inflating figures and forging his estranged wife's signature while allegedly spending the money on private school fees, a car and credit card debt. Thompson arrested outside a Gosford childcare centre yesterday after coming into contact with his former wife at the centre of an AVO.
There is nothing that I did that was against the law.
The disgraced MP narrowly avoided jail in 2014 over the misuse of union funds to a tune of $300,000. Corporate credit cards used to pay for sex, restaurants and personal expenses, all while he was National Secretary at the Health Services Union. Despite granting bail, the magistrate said the number of matters before the court was making it increasingly difficult to do so.
I'm an optimist, so I always see a glass as half full.
Airlie Walsh, 9 News.
Russian forces appear to be losing ground around the capital, Kyiv, and there's growing concern about how Putin will react. The war is wearing down both sides, Ukrainian troops fast running out of weapons.
Some Russian missile strikes defy comprehension. Mykolaiv, a city in the east where Putin's army has delivered so many cold-blooded attacks. They're now picking through what's left, its chief doctor surveying the trauma. I want to cry. Russian cruelty is so brutal, he says. They are bad people. 50 patients were moved to safety 20 minutes before the attack. Even so, 3 still died. Russian defence has released video of its troops on the move, but the chief of Ukraine's military says Russia is in retreat and has suffered irreversible losses. This village in southern Ukraine, an example of what they're up against. It should have been a quick, easy operation. Instead, they were beaten into retreat by shopkeepers, farmers and old women. Blowing up the bridge, then using British anti-tank weapons. destroying almost every Russian vehicle. US President Joe Biden says Russia's back is against the wall, and because of that, he fears the worst is yet to come.
He's already used chemical weapons in the past, and we should be careful what's about to come. He knows there'll be severe consequences because of the united NATO front, but the point is, it's real.
Ukraine's President Zelensky dropped into Italy's parliament by video link.
We are now on the brink of survival. Ukraine for Russian troops is the gateway into Europe.
It's not just Ukrainian-born soldiers pushing back the Russians in Kyiv. This is a Muslim paramilitary unit taking extraordinary risks, firing a rocket-propelled grenade from open ground. The kidnapped mayor of Melitopol in the east has spoken after his release. He says he was exchanged for 9 Russian soldiers. They were soldiers between 18 and 20 who came to kill civilians, he says. And this is the moment he was dragged off by Russian soldiers. He was held for 6 days. This is a war, he said, between Russia and the civilized world. And this is the centre of Kyiv. It's deserted, not a soul or car on the street after a 35-hour curfew was imposed because of the recent shelling. Residents told to stay at home and the media told to stay at their hotels. Anyone venturing out has been warned they'll be treated as a Russian saboteur on a reconnaissance mission. An eyewitness has given a terrifying account of his escape from Mariupol. At a checkpoint, Russian troops opened fire on a convoy of cars.
The Russians started to shoot the cars with the white ribbons on the doors, with the inscriptions "children" on the windows. Actually, they hit this car with the 2 children inside. I don't know what people could do this.
Nearly a month of fighting, and Ukraine still standing, but it continues to pay a catastrophic cost.
All right, Mark Burrows is live for us in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv this evening, where the curfew has now ended. Mark, can Ukraine keep up this resistance much longer?
Well, Peter, Ukraine not only thinks it can keep up the resistance, it believes it's making substantial gains on the Russians, especially to the north here of Kyiv. The chief advisor to President Zelensky believes the war could be over in 2 to 3 weeks. That's a very optimistic prediction, but we're not seeing that in the east around Mariupol. They're still shelling the cities on the east. In fact, the Ukraine's foreign minister is now saying 2,300 children have been kidnapped, their words, kidnapped and taken into Russian-held territory. Peter.
Mark, thank you. Back home, let's go live to Borkham Hills, where we find Nine's Jane Goldsmith. Jane, a major announcement from global megachurch Hillsong today.
Yes, Peter, church founder Brian Houston has announced his resignation as global senior pastor following an internal investigation which found that he acted inappropriately towards 2 women. Now, here at the headquarters of Hillsong in northwest Sydney, an emergency staff meeting was held today in which they announced his resignation, but also an independent review of its governance structure. And a message on the Hillsong website reads, "We can all agree Brian and wife Bobby served God faithfully over many decades, and Hillsong was birthed out of their obedience and commitment." Peter.
Jane, thank you. Labor leader Anthony Albanese has ruled out an inquiry into allegations Senator Kimberley Kitching was bullied before her death. The Prime Minister says it's hypocritical, given the number of times the opposition has demanded inquiries into the Liberal Party.
Anthony Albanese wants the outcry over the untimely death of Kimberley Kitching to be buried with her.
Will you call an independent inquiry into Kimberley Kitching's claims or not?
No, Carl.
He says the senator never made a formal complaint about bullying.
Kimberley Kitching would want us to move on, to dedicate ourselves to a Labor victory at the election.
The Prime Minister noted Labor has routinely called for inquiries based on allegations levelled against the Liberal Party. The hypocrisy and double standard of that, I think, really just doesn't sit well with the Australian people. The opposition leader did the breakfast TV rounds this morning, trying to quell a scandal that has derailed his pre-election roadshow. And he returned fire at the Prime Minister's jibe that he is gutless, saying Scott Morrison dodged public anger in the wake of the Lismore floods.
This is a Prime Minister who had his security shut off streets so that he didn't have to talk to people.
The central theme of this election is shaping as a bitter contest about the character of the leaders. If Anthony Albanese cannot stand up to the bullies in his own party, then how on earth is he going to have the strength to stand up to the bullies in our own region?
This is a Prime Minister who won't debate any issues in the federal parliament.
Labor will hope that with a budget and an election on the horizon, events will overtake this tragic story and it may well go underground. But the bitterness in the party is so deep and the anger so profound, it won't go away. Chris Ullman, 9 News.
Two senior members of the Rebels outlaw motorcycle gang have had to scrap their plans to travel to Malta. They're heading to court instead. Police pounced before they could leave the country, arresting them on firearms charges.
Dawn raids in West Hoxton and Abbotsbury. Strikeforce Raptor closes in on two senior bikie members.
Police! Search warrant! Open the door!
National President of the Rebels outlaw motorcycle gang Damien Vella and his high-ranking cousin Alex Vella Jr. are among 4 people charged with possessing illegal firearms. Police allege the cousins forced an associate to store the guns against their will. Alex Vella Jr. allegedly threatening to kill the man's daughter, stealing his car and putting it up for sale online. The timing was critical for the pair, who were trying to have their bail conditions altered to travel to Malta, where exiled bikie and former Rebels president Alex Vella Sr. is celebrating his 50th anniversary with the club, but police stepped in.
We allege that the two people that were about to leave Australia were going over there, obviously not for a family reunion.
It's understood international members of the Rebels gang are planning to gather in Malta for what's known as a worldwide run, a chance to meet and discuss plans for the Outlaw Motorcycle Club's global network. Today, Damien Vella was granted release but forced to hand over his passport.
Are you disappointed you won't be going to Malta?
His cousin was refused bail. Bianca Balza, 9 News.
A former state Liberal minister charged with a string of sex offences is tonight digging in, refusing the Premier's demand he resign from Parliament. The Perrottet government today moved to suspend Gareth Ward from the House, but stopped short of a permanent expulsion.
He's facing some of the most serious sex charges, allegations that have already cost him a seat at the cabinet table and a voice in the Liberal Party room. But Gareth Ward is refusing to forfeit his position as a member of state parliament. And so the government is trying to force him out while the case is dealt with.
I did text Gareth today to inform him that there would be a motion to move suspension, and he has acknowledged that text.
Gareth Ward is charged with the alleged indecent assault of a 17-year-old boy and sexual abuse of a 27-year-old man. He says he's innocent and intends to prove it.
The best path of action here is to resign.
The suspension means the local Kiama electorate office will be without an MP and the people without representation on Macquarie Street.
Nothing's really a surprise in politics anymore.
As for Mr Ward's parliamentary salary of close to $170,000 a year, the government's seeking further legal advice on whether that can be revoked during the suspension. Without Mr Ward in Parliament, the Premier now relies heavily on the votes of independents to help him pass legislation, but he's got them offside as a bill to legalise voluntary assisted dying stalls in the upper house.
I'm extremely frustrated and disappointed by the games that are being played with the voluntary assisted dying bill.
There are people in that House who will try their hardest to have this drag on almost indefinitely.
Liz Daniels, 9 News.
Threatening clouds over Sydney today, but so far no rainfall has been recorded in the gauges. Belinda, when is it coming?
Yeah, nothing officially recorded, Pete, but there are a few light coastal showers on the radar right now. The southerly change bringing cooler temperatures to the east today, a top of 24.3 for the city, much warmer in our west with a top of 28.1 in Penrith. That change also triggering thunderstorms further north, damaging winds, large hail and heavy rainfall likely in parts of the northern rivers and tablelands, the mid-north coast and the Hunter. And that is just the start of it for New South Wales. Over the next week, parts of the coast could receive 100 to 200 millimetres. I'll have more details on that severe weather later on, Pete.
Belinda, thank you. Two protests, two brothers. Tonight, revelations the men who brought our port to a standstill for 2 days running are siblings from Germany who now face deportation. The story next. Wallets and ID cards, tragic signs of life in the rubble of China's air disaster. Crunch time for nuts. We'll tell you how many a day is good for your cholesterol. And the sharks who found themselves swimming with royalty. The acting Premier is demanding two German brothers be deported after a fresh round of protests at Port Botany. After yesterday's mayhem, a 21-year-old is spending the night in the cells after suspending himself from a pole at the container terminal.
Dangling from a pole over the edge of a bridge that is the only access to a major container terminal.
I'm effectively blocking all trucks from entering and exiting.
To do that, his precarious structure held in place by guide ropes strung across the roadway.
If a truck runs through the line, I'm falling about, I guess, 7 meters or so.
Trucks that had just collected containers were stuck inside the terminal, those arriving to collect their loads stuck outside.
It's totally difficult to get in there, so I got the 8 o'clock slot, so I'm not going to make it, you know.
As police planned their approach, the 22-year-old lowered himself closer to the water below. A rescue officer followed on another rope, holding the protester until Marine Police arrived to take him away safely. The operation taking almost 2 hours.
It's incredibly unsafe. And it's really unfair to put police or anyone else in a situation where they're going to go and rescue one of these people that engage in unsafe acts.
Police have already warned that they will come down hard on Blockade Australia if they conduct any more of these protests, but the group itself has warned that they do plan more action. The man is the brother of the protester who caused mayhem at Port Botany yesterday. Both are German nationals. New South Wales Police are now consulting Border Force on tougher action.
What we've seen over the past few days in relation to Port Botany is actually economic vandalism. My message for them is you're not wanted, go back home and we're going to deport you back to Germany.
Eddie Meyer, 9 News.
OK, let's go straight back to Port Botany with breaking news tonight where two new protesters have been blockading the container terminal. For 40 minutes, two trucks parked across the road with one protester sitting on top of their vehicle. A Facebook live stream from Blockade Australia says they're Helen and Dom, two wildlife carers who want action against climate change. Vladimir Putin's most prominent critic has been jailed for a further 9 years for fraud after a trial dismissed as a sham. Alexei Navalny had his microphone muted when he tried to speak in the makeshift court at the maximum security prison where he is being held. Rescuers have found wreckage and personal belongings at the plane crash site in southern China, but no sign of any survivors. The search for the Boeing 737's black box recorder is still underway. Aviation officials hoping it can shed some light on the cause of the crash. The China Eastern flight was carrying 132 people when it nosedived into hills. In love, but afraid, Ben Roberts-Smith's mistress gives more details on their relationship in front of her former lover's parents. A pickup truck picked up and thrown by a tornado. You won't believe what happens next. One of the biggest improvements in car safety since the seatbelt being carried out at Eastern Creek. And is it a bird or is it a plane? Well, it's an incredible mix of both, and it's in our airspace. The former mistress of Ben Roberts-Smith claims she was both in love with and afraid of the decorated soldier. During day 2 of her testimony in the federal court, the woman revealed she met with police at least 5 times to discuss allegations she was punched by the VC recipient.
Ben Roberts-Smith had some extra support today. His parents turning up to watch the second day of emotional evidence from their son's former lover, who, under the alias Person 17, claimed she tried to report allegations the soldier punched her in a Canberra hotel after she'd drunkenly fallen downstairs at an event at Parliament House. The woman told the federal court she went to Queensland Police on 2 occasions. I told them I'd been having an affair with a high-profile military person, but they wouldn't do anything because I wouldn't tell them who the person was. After seeking out journalist Nick McKenzie, the woman said it led to meetings with the AFP, ACT detectives and police investigating accusations of war crimes in Afghanistan. I said to them I don't really want to make a formal complaint. I'm scared if all this becomes public, he'll think this is my doing and will seek payback. Charges have never been laid and Roberts-Smith is suing 9 newspapers for defamation. Under cross-examination, Person 17 was accused of lying and grilled about continuing the affair after the alleged assault. She explained she was simultaneously in love with and afraid of Ben Roberts-Smith. An ex-soldier trying to pull out of the trial will now be forced to testify against the VC winner. Tiffany Genders, 9 News.
The quiet streets of Five Dock were disturbed by the blare of police sirens as a stolen Audi led officers on a chase down Lyons Road. The car lost police but crashed into a tree and caught fire just after midnight. Residents saw 3 men make a run for it.
We both ran out to try and help and see what's going on. We went across the road and noticed that there was actually nobody in the car.
They were halfway down the road and they were just screaming at each other saying, oh, hurry up, the police are coming.
The dog squad was called, but the offenders still haven't been found. In the United States, Texas has been slammed by more than a dozen powerful tornadoes. At least 1 person killed, many injured, and countless homes have been destroyed. And there are fears the state remains in the firing line, with more giant twisters predicted to hit.
A pickup truck in the belly of the beast spun out on its side. The vehicle tossed back up onto its wheels and driving away as the Lone Star State was barraged by at least a dozen tornadoes, winds whipping up to 240 kilometres an hour. In Round Rock, north of Austin, roofs were sheared off homes, trees ripped out of the ground. In town, it hit restaurants and the local bank. In the direct path of another twister, 500 students, staff and parents forced to shelter inside Jacksboro Elementary School. Its roof ripped off, a wall collapsed, and the gymnasium destroyed. Incredibly, no one was injured.
It's just a miracle, and
But many were left homeless.
Twister 2, that's exactly what it was like.
The governor crediting local TV stations for saving lives.
This is a confirmed tornado on the ground. You need to be in your shelter right now.
Meteorologists acting as effective early warning systems
to see if that lowers and becomes a tornado.
That same storm system now drifting east.
Okay, folks, get to your safe place.
Multiple powerful tornadoes sweeping through New Orleans city centre this evening, destroying homes, bringing down power lines, with peak tornado season still a month away.
Dude, that's a giant tornado.
In the United States, Alison Petrowski, 9 News.
Thousands of Optus and TPG customers are being refunded after the telcos failed to let them know the internet speeds they were paying for were not attainable on their NBN. Optus is repaying $4.4 million to 34,000 people and TPG $2.1 million to 4,400 customers. Swerving at the last minute when you nearly miss the off-ramp, braking suddenly as traffic backs up in a tunnel and negotiating roundabouts. These are some of the driver behaviours mimicked on a racetrack to help predict accident hotspots and improve road safety. And 9 News was given a front seat ride.
At Sydney Motorsport Park, different makes and models are doing laps of the supercar track. But this isn't a race, it's research. The track has been set up to mimic real-life roads, from navigating sharp turns, roundabouts and sudden hazards.
This is
the really sharp left-hand turn. So this would mimic something like a Cahill Expressway.
Sydney startup Compass IoT uses connected vehicle data to track driver behaviour on our roads. The data is collected in real time, revealing where motorists are more likely to have a crash.
The roundabout experiment that we did today, a lot of people enter roundabouts quite strong, and once they're realising they're going a bit too fast, we'll slam on the brakes and then pull out of it, which is why you can see a lot more of the red dots here.
The technology is already being used by toll road operator Transurban. One of the experiments is based on the Rooty Hill exit on the M7.
That's an exit where we often see spill back onto the main part of the network that can cause congestion, and when people aren't paying attention, that can end up in a rear-end crash.
When you're behind the wheel on the track, it's tempting not to put your foot down and go for it. But this experiment is to control conditions, with drivers not allowed to go above 100 kilometres an hour. The data will be analysed to improve new and existing roads and hopefully save lives.
One of the biggest improvements and jumps forward in road safety since the introduction of seatbelts.
Kate Creedon, 9 News.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge got up close and personal with the residents of the second biggest barrier reef in the world, scuba diving in Belize. They then jetted over to Jamaica, the birthplace of reggae, where they played football and met the national bobsleigh team. A surprising discovery has been made. COVID can cause diabetes. Ahead, the research that's linked the two and what we can do about it. We've all got them, but some wheelie bins are causing more trouble than others. A sticky situation at Hornsby. That's ahead. James, George Burgess won't play against the Sharks.
Pete, with a police charge hanging over his head, the Dragons have decided to sit him out, while coach Anthony Griffin has been forced to defend the club's culture. His comments next. Will Jared Weir-Hargreaves be able to contain his anger when the Roosters face off with the Rabbitohs? And can Barry Hall repeat his most famous punch when he fights Sonny Bill later tonight?
And severe weather set to hit flood-ravaged areas across New South Wales over the coming days. I will have the latest warnings for you shortly.
It's the popular pandemic tax shortcut that puts money back in your pocket for working from home.
A lot of Australians have been using it.
So why is it facing the chop?
Costs in general are just rising, petrol costs are up.
What you need to know to maximise your next tax return.
See the full story on 9 News tomorrow at 6.
Roosters fans have no need to worry. Enforcer Jared Weir-Hargreaves insists he won't lose his cool in the emotional rematch with the Rabbitohs on Friday night. But Weir-Hargreaves hasn't lost an ounce of passion for the game and plans on going for several years yet.
These are the shaky sideline scenes that were the byproduct of the explosive Mitchell-Manu collision. The Roosters' big dog, Jared Weir-Hargreaves, was the angriest of the players after he saw Latrell accidentally take out Joey. His emotion is based on his love for Manu and his team.
Yeah, I love these boys, You never want to see your boys go down. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of passion there for sure.
As the Roosters' alpha male, Jared will set the tone for the players on Friday night. He says he'll be able to contain the rage.
You'll be able to contain it?
Yeah, I'm mature now.
I'm not so sure. I'm worried about you.
33 now, bro. Obviously been doing this a while now, Danny.
The angry giant we see on the field is different to the doting dad we see off it.
There's a balance in everything, right? There's a balance in life, and I enjoy going home and being dad, but I also like coming to work and being Jared the Rooster.
Jared knows how to wake the beast.
Comes with a bit of time, I think, a bit of experience, and just knowing who you are, knowing your role, and sort of staying in your lane.
And the 33-year-old says the career road is long.
Yeah, I still love it, mate. The drive and the hunger for what I do is still there every day. I'm not looking for excuses yet, so I'll go as hard as I can for as long as I can.
Danny Weidler, 9 News.
George Burgess won't play for the Dragons tomorrow night after he was charged with sexually touching a woman without her consent. The NRL still hasn't decided whether Burgess will be subject to the no-fault stand-down policy, but the club doesn't want him to be a distraction.
The dark cloud of Jack de Bellin's sexual assault trials hung over the Dragons for 2.5 years. While George Burgess's charge isn't as severe, Anthony Griffin doesn't want history to repeat.
So we're probably going to move on because it's going to drag on.
and let the NRL sort it out with our management. He'll come out today and someone else will go in.
Burgess has become the third St George Illawarra player since 2018 to be accused of a sexual offence. Griffin today forced to defend his club.
We're an enormous welfare resource with 2 or 3 people that educate the players in every club.
As the NRL weighs up whether or not to stand Burgess down, the Dragons are preparing for a local derby against Cronulla. Their new boss, Craig Fitzgibbon, is still adjusting to life as a head coach.
It's intense, that's for sure. Obviously, you're constantly trying to think and make sure you're well prepared and get everything right, but it's been enjoyable so far. It's challenging, but enjoyable in the same token.
Tom Trbojevic is brutally honest about his form in the opening 2 rounds.
Obviously not good enough, so need to get better.
His teammates say they deserve some of the blame.
We need to play the balls, obviously, like every other team, for your key men to play off the back of it, and I don't think as a team we're doing him any justice.
Turbo is ready to shake things up if teams keep singling him out to keep him quiet.
Other teams are doing, that's what they're trying, to find ways around it.
Luke Dovesey, 9 News.
Well, they were Goliaths on the field in their respective football codes. Tonight, Sonny Bill Williams and Barry Hall go head-to-head in the boxing ring. Emma Lawrence is in Darling Harbour, and Emma, it's been billed as the turf war.
Brace, we have been waiting a long time for this, and they are finally going to go at it. Now, if you look at their boxing record, Sonny Bill certainly appears to be the favourite. He is undefeated from 8 fights, while Barry Hall has only had the 1 fight, and that is a draw against Paul Gallen. You'd be absolutely mad to write him off, though. He is such a beast, and who could forget that moment from back in 2008 when he punched Brent Staker on the AFL field. Perhaps that is a sign of what is to come for SBW. Only time will tell, Brace. All of the action is exclusive to Stan Event this evening.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Emma. Well, the Socceroos' hopes of direct qualification for the World Cup go on the line tomorrow against Japan. And although they've only won 1 of their past 4 matches, there's still plenty of belief amongst the group.
Courage will win us the game. The courage of the players to do the right thing, to show their talents, which will cause a lot of problems for the Japan team. And more than anything, you play a home game.
Australia needs to beat Japan, then Saudi Arabia next week in order to avoid the playoffs. And Pakistan is piling on the runs in the 3rd and deciding test in Lahore. At lunch on day 3, the hosts 1 for 159 in their first innings, trailing Australia by 232. Chances have been few and far between, but in the last over before lunch, Steve Smith put down Azhar Ali, a tough chance of the bowling of Mitchell Swepson. So who you got, Pete, Sonny Bill or Barry Hall?
I'm smart, James. I like them both.
Very smart move, actually.
Thank you. Next, the new research about COVID and diabetes, plus the good oil on nuts, tasty and life-saving. Spectacular pictures of a US stealth bomber entering Australian airspace.
And the garbage bins with a message that Hornsby Council wants to wheel out of sight.
Experts are calling for diabetes screening to be considered after a large study found the disease is a component of long COVID. Medical reporter Gabriella Rogers explains.
There's new evidence that people who've had COVID, even those with mild symptoms, are at increased risk of developing diabetes within a year. Researchers reviewed the medical records of Army veterans in the US. They looked at more than 180,000 people who developed COVID at the start of the pandemic until September last year. That group was compared to millions of veterans who didn't have the infection. Overall, people diagnosed with COVID-19 were 46% more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Australian experts say it's an important study, but other factors may have contributed to the rise.
People who've had COVID may be more likely to consult their doctor. And that might mean that conditions like diabetes, which don't always cause symptoms, might be just picked up more frequently.
The authors say the virus itself could impair production of insulin in the pancreas, or persistent low-grade inflammation could be to blame.
We're going to need to continue this to monitor what happens to people as a result of having COVID. And that's going to occupy us for months and years to come so that we get a full understanding of this condition.
Long COVID studies are continuing here and overseas.
Gabby, thank you. There are plenty of simple clues to a longer, healthier life, like eating nuts. Researchers at the University of Wollongong have found that eating just a handful of nuts a day can reduce by up to 15% the risk of cardiovascular disease. The university processed dietary studies from 25 countries, finding nuts help to significantly reduce so-called bad cholesterol. Some people wear their heart on their sleeve, some wear their heart on their wheelie bin. But Hornsby father's decision to plaster his bin with a political attack on the Prime Minister has drawn the wrath of the local council.
To you and me, they're bins. But for Hornsby Council, they're climate change activists at risk of upsetting the Shire's non-partisan approach to garbage receptacles.
The bins are bins owned by council. They're let to people for the purposes of receiving their waste.
When the Rickwood household wanted to advocate for political movement on climate change, they placed their protest on their red and yellow bins. And it wasn't long before they received a stern missive from Hornsby Shire. The council says if the stickers were not immediately removed, the household risked the council's contractors not servicing the bins.
That is a pretty extraordinary, un-Australian moment from this council.
And the neighbours?
Well, that's clearly ridiculous, right?
Does it really matter? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. It's just a bin at the end of the day.
The Rickwoods, however, plan to leave the stickers where they are. The next chapter in this battle of the bins, taking place next garbage night. Mike Dalton, 9 News.
A surprise visitor snuck into Australia today, a US B-2 stealth bomber flying into Amberley Air Base outside of Brisbane. The sharp geometry of its wings entails a stark and spectacular outline in the sky. The visit of the long-range radar-dodging aircraft coincides with a meeting between the RAAF's top brass and the Chief of US Forces in the Pacific. Coming up, finance, petrol prices and Belinda with our weather.
Thanks, Pete. The cloudy conditions sticking around tonight with a few light showers, and there's plenty more rain on the way. The latest forecast is coming up next.
Some good news for travellers. The Australian dollar is touching multi-year highs. Here's our business reporter, Chris Kohler.
A pocketful of Aussie dollars is going further in Japan than it has in more than 6 years. This month it also cracked 4-year highs against the euro, as well as multi-month highs against the Swiss franc, British pound and US dollar, in some pretty welcome news for anyone planning an overseas trip. Today it backtracked a little bit but remains close to those highs as international currencies all take Russian sanctions and the threat of rising interest rates a little differently. The share market hit a new 9-week high today with CBA at its highest level for the year and Macquarie back above $200 a share. Unity was the best performer in the ASX 200 while Fisher & Paykel was the worst of the day.
Chris, thank you. To fuel, the average price for unleaded petrol sitting at $2.07.7 a litre. Diesel, you'll pay on average $2.19.3. Here's Belinda.
Thanks, Pete. What a difference a day makes. Hardly a cloud in the sky yesterday, and today our city blanketed by them. The southerly change bringing a cooler day to the east, reaching up to 28 in our west, but the city stopping at 25. Tomorrow, showers and storms are on the cards for central and eastern parts of our state. A coastal trough developing off the New South Wales north coast, bringing heavy falls, gusty winds and hail is also possible. Brisbane staying dry, partly cloudy and a top of 29 tomorrow. A shower or two in Canberra developing, but only 1 to 2 millimetres forecast. Still cool in Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide, reaching the low 20s, low 30s for Perth under sunny skies. Back home to New South Wales, and a wet day ahead for much of our state with showers and possible thunderstorms in the east. The heaviest rain expected on the mid-north coast and northern tablelands with widespread falls of 15 to 25 millimetres, but places like Armidale and Port Macquarie could see more like 25 to 50. The rain continuing for the next week with a total of 100 to 200 millimetres possible, and with catchments remaining saturated from recent rainfall events, there is an increased risk of flash flooding and river rises, particularly in areas of the Hunter, mid-north coast and the northern rivers. Tomorrow, daytime temperatures across our state generally below average, a top of 22 degrees for Bathurst, 21 in Wollongong and Batemans Bay. Narrabri and Burke, though, still making the low 30s. On to Sydney, more cloudy skies tomorrow, a very high chance of showers, most likely in the afternoon and evening. There's also the chance of a storm, 10 to 20 millimetres forecast in our west and 10 to 25 near the coast. A much cooler day than today, a top of 21 or 22 in our west. That is about 5 or 6 degrees below the March average, 22 for the city with a light to moderate sea breeze, and overnight temperatures ranging from 16 to 19. Tomorrow, just the start of the rain, a further 15 to 25 millimetres for the city on Friday, a shower or two on Saturday, and another rainy day on Sunday with 8 to 20 millimetres forecast. Our west also in for a drenching with 50 to 90 millimetres forecast over the next week. Temperatures remaining below average until Monday, so cool, cloudy and wet. Hopefully we'll get a bit of sunshine on Saturday, Pete.
OK, Belinda, thank you. Tracy is next with the current affair. That is 9 News for this Wednesday. I'm Peter Overton. I hope you have a good evening. From all of us, good night.